Yeah.
Can you bleep me if I say...
You're making sure he's filming before he turns the corner, or what?
Yeah.
Just
Holy
hell.
I didn't warn him about anything.
You didn't warn me about anything.
Really? Oh, and the cats scatter.
Name, location, and debut year.
Location, like I'm in my basement.
Okay.
But Jason Jerry, Green Bay, Howard, Wisconsin. Debut year for wrestling was 1999.
I know exactly who you're talking about, though.
Cybertronic Spree, I think.
Yeah, and the song is Cybertronic Warrior.
Yeah.
That song is awesome.
So I don't...
That chick's voice is amazing. What got you first involved in pro wrestling?
My friend Will Sintowski, who was more of a wrestling fan than I ever was. I was a fan in the 80s, the Hogan years, but really never a huge fan. So when we started watching Raw and Nitro and the Monday Night Wars, Will got really into it, and he went to see a local indie show at Concert Cafe, I believe is the one he went to, and fell in love with it and came back and kept telling us, you got to check this out, this local wrestling. It's fantastic. It's so entertaining. So we went to check out a show at the Watering Hole and ran into Mike Krause, and he had all these ideas to put ACW on television, and we were a bunch of TV guys. We worked in TV, and he talked us into working with him to come up with the concept and the execution of a TV program.
So now they started making these new, I think it's 35th anniversary figures.
Okay.
And they're amazing because now they can finally make the robot version of them look like they did on the cartoons. Back then it was like, oh, that's a pretty cool car, but it looks like ass as a robot, you know?
Yeah.
And we got on local television. It was the UPN affiliate, when UPN was a thing.
UPN 32, right?
When UPN 32, yep, UPN 32 was a thing. For a while, I think SmackDown debuted on UPN, so there was that connection, although we were on before SmackDown was. We were on every Saturday night at... When were we on? We were on after Ned the Dead, so there was never a specific time frame. It was always Saturday Night Live, and then Ned the Dead, so we would come on usually around 2 in the morning.
Oh, wow.
Ned the Dead was one of those old-timey movie hosts where he would do the cheesy horror movies. So it was the perfect lead-in to wrestling, and Ned was like a local legend. He actually got pretty good numbers for being on at midnight on a Saturday, so ACW TV kind of became this really popular underground thing in Green Bay.
G.I. Joe, to me, growing up, always had the highest playability factor just because there were so many of them. They were at a scale that you could, use more vehicles with. But it was all about the articulation for me. You had 5 points of articulation on those old original Star Wars figures. They were from, how much footage was there to really remember of these characters, as to where G.I. Joe and Transformers, the amount of animation they put out for them was just, in terms of sheer quantity, you had more to follow.
I think it's pretty interesting, too, because every now and then, while I'm watching those old tapes and watching those old matches, Joey Jet Avalon,
Yep.
He'll be like, oh, hey, I was at that show. Yeah. And, I'll actually rewind, and I'm, freeze framing to find it. And I'm like, oh, there he is. So it's kind of interesting to think that you have so many wrestlers that are active now in the Wisconsin indie scene that were directly influenced either by watching it on TV or being there in attendance. And you can see them in those old shows in the crowd, and now look where they are now.
You talking about, Corey, Ruthie, back when he was a kid in Manitowoc. Colucci used to, come down as a kid and watch the shows. In fact, we had a real good relationship with the yarding community back then, actually. I took a lot of heat from the veterans for it, but I like to maintain a good... I saw them as a farm league.
We are here in an undisclosed bunker, a location that will not be mentioned for the safety and security. You came through, you had to go through one of those giant safe cracker things, like from The Price is Right, where you had to spin the right numbers to get in, and then fight your way past all the guard dogs.
Yeah.
Because I hear this Fin Fang Foom is something around like $600.
Oh, that's all. Wow.
You got a lot of kids, not all of them could afford to train, but we tried to give them as much training as we could in limited time and have them pay their dues in all sorts of other ways. And a lot of the stars of your indie wrestling today started out as support staff, whether it was security or, referees at the time. I put them to use for something. They all paid their dues, even if they couldn't afford to go through camp the right way. That's how we found most of the Appleton and Oshkosh kids. Dylan was a yarder. It was just Wonder, the hardcore midget. And I saw him jump off of a garage in Appleton.
So you, as at the time promoter, a business head behind ACW,
Yeah.
were going to these these yarding shows.
Yeah, Ben Johnson and I would just grab a 24 case of Pabst and pull up our lawn chairs and watch indie shows in the summer. We loved doing it. And that's where I found a lot of the up-and-coming talent. And honestly, they called me cheap for a reason. A lot of those veterans would start to price themselves out of spots. So yeah, I'd go to the yard and I'd scout for talent. I make no qualms about saying I gave them their shot, and I'm proud to have given their shot because so many of them have become a success. Mm-hmm. It was Shakespeare in the park. It was wrestling in the yard.
Yeah. Give us a snapshot through your eyes of the early years of ACW, before NWA Wisconsin even, but like early ACW.
Early ACW, like when I came in and we were just putting TV on the air, it was a tremendous team effort. These were local guys who really banded together to make something special. This was people who knew each other from other avenues. When Mike Krause brought these people together, it was really special. It was lightning in a bottle. And then he went out of his way to get some bigger names, Rock and Randy and Adam Pierce and Angelo Stefano, the manager of Champions, the GQ centerfold, such colorful heels.
This was the coolest thing about episode 1, was the pod racing.
Pod racing?
That was so cool.
It was a little like NASCAR in space for me. I could have settled for 1 trip around the track. 3 was a bit much.
They were good characters, and they were compelling characters, and they made you, the way they told a story, and a lot of this had to do with Eric Hammers and Angelo Stefano and the booking in the early years. They had such that indie wrestling theory storytelling down to where you couldn't wait for the next show. They really utilized cliffhangers and not so much storylines, but they understood that if you built the characters, people would want to come back for the characters. Everybody had a gimmick, and you don't see a whole lot of that now, or maybe you are starting to see it again. I don't know. Wrestling is always cyclical, but it was. If you're talking about a snapshot of back then, it was guys working as a team, and everybody had a very unique, interesting gimmick.
I like Tecmo Bowl. The original Tecmo Bowl was great, but not until Super Tecmo Bowl were you allowed to actually change them out in the depth chart, and it actually kept stats for the first time. Otherwise, before, I would have to, such a nerd, you'd have to sit there and keep stats as you were going in the game.
You think you're a nerd? I used to play Super Mario Kart, and I would put every character on every track and do time trials just to see who was What is, for those who don't know, is it A2 NWO or A square NWO?
Oh, it's A2 NWO.
A2 NWO?
Which full on spelled was Action 2 News World Order. Because Will and I, when we started doing ACW TV, worked at Channel 2. Hire me back, Channel 2. I'll come back in a heartbeat. So that's what the A2 NWO was. It was just a group of like 5, sometimes 6 of us. Half of us worked at Channel 2, and we started going to see those shows. Then we ended up becoming the driving force behind the show, and it stuck.
So you bring him up a lot. Will the Thrill Sintowski.
Yeah.
He's perhaps one of your, if not your best friend. What's the story behind that? Like, how do you guys meet and stuff?
We met at Channel 2, which is interesting because he went to high school with my wife, but I still didn't know him until he got hired at Channel 2. And one day he walks in the basement and he's like, "I'm your new photographer. I'm Will the Thrill." To know the Thrill is to love the Thrill. He just brings such a joyful exuberance around him wherever he goes. He was with me at my side through most of the years there, doing whatever was needed, mostly camera work and things like that, like he's doing for you. You've got your own Thrill here, but then when we weren't taping the shows so much anymore, Will would do some ring announcing. He was, after I started getting out of it a little bit, then they made him commissioner. So he had a long run as commissioner when I was barely even paying attention. The cooler he used to bring to shows full of liquor, we called that his cabinet.
Cabinet meetings.
Yep, cabinet meetings.
Actually, I have to say, and all of pro wrestling, he probably has the biggest influence on my life.
Really?
Because if you remember, when I first started the wrestling scene, I did not drink at all.
Yes.
Not that I was against it or I had any moral obligation. It's
Right.
drinking, whatever. I just never really liked drinks. And I can say now, Will the Thrill Santowski made me a summer Hummer once at a cabinet meeting. And I thought it was freaking awesome. I was like, oh my God, I love this drink. Yeah. And well, now you have me at any after party just drinking straight Captain on the Rocks. And it's all because of Will the Thrill Santowski.
Wow. Yeah, we're probably responsible for contributing to the delinquency of several minors in the course of the history of our wrestling fed. I can recall getting Ben Johnson and Hornswoggle drunk many times when they were under the age of 21.
Yeah, I didn't mention anything. I just told him, yeah, we're going to Jason Jerry's basement. He was like, all right.
I was like,
That's
cool,
all I
dude's
said.
basement. This will be cool.
This is officially is known as the lounge. I started on this end putting the ones up in the rafters. The others just smattered as it grew, but this corner was where it first started, the original.
Who would you say are some notables that came through in your years of being involved in indie wrestling?
Main players in this area, I think you got to start with Ken Anderson. I think Ken was the first to really make it. He's the first who guys could sit back and say, yeah, I know that guy. I worked with him. Dino Bambino was another guy from that era who was just an excellent worker. Adrian Lynch certainly was a heel inside the ring and out. The consummate pro. Learned a lot of old school ways with him. The proper ways of paying your dues and things like that. The more you get into like the NWA era then, I think you're going to see guys like Dysfunction. Talk about a kid who came in at like 17 and started getting over on hardcore stuff and then just ended up becoming one of the best all-around workers that there was. He really knew the mentality of how to work a match and get the crowd either way. To become a long-standing promoter like he did. If there's a Rushmore of Wisconsin, he's definitely competing to be on there. Silas Young, Matt Winchester, there's another guy. Rob Norwood and Shane Hills as Culture Shock. They had a long run there, and Shane is still active. Who else can we even bring up from that? There are so many. I could go on and on.
The first, I think, 12 from 77 are right there. They're not in the best of shape they've been played with, but I kept all the backing cards. The proof of purchases were all cut out to send in for the free ones. Thanks, Grandma. Those are all the original Star Wars that I got. You know, I remember getting Princess Leia and C-3PO from the Shopko on Military in 1978. Oh, yeah? Yeah.
What did it feel like when you finally decided to sell and officially have nothing to do with wrestling anymore?
I had weaned myself out of it for so long. I had stepped back for the longest time, always trying to find someone who could take it over for me. I never wanted to do it forever. But when I finally sold it to Ron, it was relief. It was absolute relief because I was doing a lot of the stuff that normally I had a team to do. It was pretty much just me and Bruno that were running things. When I finally sold it, it was just like a huge weight was off my shoulders. It's awesome that I'm welcome back, but I don't miss it. I don't miss it at all.
I don't have anything out except for this Honky Tonk Man autographed guitar
That's pretty cool.
from when we had him out in Shawano. Were you around at that point yet?
Nope, 2003. I was not.
3. You have such an old soul. I always feel like you have been around longer than you actually were.
So in recent years, at least recent years, you never want to shy away from controversy, even if that means that you're perceived as the bad guy. Where does that come from, the willing to just do it even though this might not turn out well for you? That courage, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it is, I think, courage. It's certainly not the smartest thing to do because I've made a lot of enemies. Sorry. I always want it to be said about me that I was someone who spoke my mind. Whether I was right or wrong, at least I spoke my mind about it. Yeah, I got into a situation at WPW where they made me commissioner. I felt as though it came out of nowhere. It didn't make a whole lot of sense. And so when I came out, I started talking about Jerry Styles and how much it meant to be there at Baba Louie's and the place where Jerry wrestled, and the fans started getting on me a bit, and I snapped.
I still have the original edit controller from making all those tapes, you just have 3 big giant VHS machines running into here. This is how you would control them remotely, and this is how you would mix them. No cutting. You'd actually use the roll bar to actually roll back and forth between your sources.
Oh, okay.
I absolutely snapped because Jerry's a subject that it was very, very sore at the time. And when they started booing me and saying, who the hell's Jerry, and stuff like that, it got to me. And I knew there at that point in time that I wasn't going to be commissioner anymore after that night. So I unleashed. Yeah. And I wouldn't say I'm proud of it, but I am proud for standing up in what I believe in. Perhaps didn't go about it the right way, but I can't go back now, and I'd probably do it again. I'm not going to do it again. Trust me. If you're going to have me on a show, I won't. But
so what do you think, Wayne?
I'm very overwhelmed.
That was my first time down here.
You're gonna look at this video and be like, "What the fuck is Quaid shooting? He keeps switching and going here, and like, oh fuck, this is cool."
Yeah, a lot of it comes from being down some dark roads, and I think there were times where I was volatile and you didn't know what I would say with a live mic, that's for sure. There are probably some out there who say that I drank too much, and back in the days, I think I did drink too much. But you know what? I'm in a better place. I'm in a lot better place now, and I don't know if distancing myself from wrestling has something to do with that, but I'd like to think it does a little bit. So it's nice to stop in every now and then. It's a good place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there. Yeah. I want my legacy to be twofold. A guy that always spoke his mind and was always honest. And I want to be known as someone who wanted to help the next generation get over. The eye should always be on the future, not the past. So I'm glad that there are guys out there who I played a role in their career development. And I just want to be remembered as someone who was helpful. Thanks for watching Between Counts with TJ. I've been Jason Jerry. I really appreciate you watching. I don't have that much to plug, so maybe on Facebook, check out the Greater Green Bay Society of the Llama.